Jesus looked at me and pulled back a heavy spiritual curtain, revealing that the great Satan of America and the Islamic Republic of my homeland are actually partners in a stage drama. While they scream threats at each other on your television screens, I saw them shaking hands in the shadows, laughing over maps of the Persian Gulf. This isn't just a political theory. I saw it with my own eyes, while my soul was suspended between worlds. Jesus showed me that the very enemy I was taught to hate since childhood was actually a business partner to the men sending me to die. The blood spilled in Basra wasn't for God, but to grease a secret deal. But for you to truly grasp the terrifying weight of what the King of Kings showed me, I must take you back to the moment the world turned black. My name is Reza Mohammadi, and in 1982, I was a 34-year-old soldier, convinced that my rifle was the key to heaven. I grew up in the religious heart of Isfahan, breathing in the propaganda that the West was the ultimate darkness. I wasn't a politician. I was a man of the dirt and the gun. My heart stopped for exactly 4 minutes in a field hospital after an Iraqi jet turned my trench into a furnace. I left my body to stand before a man with eyes of truth. What I am about to reveal is the blueprint of a global deception that is still active today, governing the prices at your local gas station and the fear in your heart. I saw the specific oil routes, the secret meetings in European villas, and the dark mist used to manipulate entire populations into a harvest of hatred. This goes far beyond the headlines. It is a spiritual lineage of deceit, serving a master darker than any president. Do you ever feel like the enemies on the news seem suspiciously coordinated? Tell me your thoughts below. Now let me show you the exact moment the bomb stopped and my journey into the light began. To understand how I could witness such a staged drama between nations, you have to know the man I was before the fire. In 1982, I was a 34-year-old soldier standing in the choking dust of the front lines, a son of Isfahan who breathed the slogans of the revolution like oxygen. I was a man who believed that the great Satan across the ocean was the only reason for my suffering, and my rifle was my ticket to an eternal garden. I didn't see the strings being pulled. I only saw the enemy in front of me. I was a devout tool of a system that traded my life for oil, waiting for a death I thought I understood. The end arrived with the scream of an Iraqi jet, a sound so sharp it felt like it was tearing my soul out through my ears. A flash of white heat followed, turning my trench into a pressurized oven of fire and pulverized earth. I didn't feel the shrapnel enter my chest. I only felt a sudden, violent heaviness as the world turned into a gray, flickering blur. My lungs refused to take in the smoky air, and I felt myself slipping into a cold, dark water that didn't belong to this earth. The sounds of war became distant echoes as my physical heart gave one last, desperate kick and then finally stopped. That was when the lightness took over, a sensation of being untethered from a heavy, painful anchor. I found myself suspended 5 meters above the trench, looking down at the carnage with a clarity that was terrifying. Below me, a medic was screaming for help, his hands sliding in the dark red blood that was soaking my uniform. I watched him pump my chest with a rhythmic desperation, unaware that I was already gone. I saw the dirt on my own lifeless face and the stillness of my hands. They told me later that I was clinically dead for exactly 4 minutes, a span of time where I was no longer a resident of this world. The battlefield of Basra began to dissolve, the smoke and the screams fading into a deep, vibrating silence. The horizon didn't just vanish. It folded in on itself as a powerful force began to pull me away from the mud. I wasn't drifting toward the sky, but moving inward and through a tunnel of light that felt as dense as liquid and smelled of cedar and rain. The fear of the unknown was replaced by an overwhelming sense of arrival, as if I were being summoned by a name I had forgotten I possessed. I was leaving the theater of men behind, headed toward a confrontation that would shatter everything I knew about God. The darkness of the battlefield didn't last as long as I expected. I felt a sudden, powerful pull, moving inward through a tunnel of light that felt as dense as warm liquid. It wasn't just a visual brightness. It was a physical presence that smelled like cedar and fresh rain after a long drought in Isfahan. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of the war and the shrapnel in my chest were gone. There was an absolute absence of pain, a silence so profound, it felt like it had its own heartbeat. I emerged into a space that defied every physical law I had ever known on earth. Standing in the center of that living radiance was a man I never expected to see. He didn't look like the pale, blue-eyed statues I had seen in Western magazines. His skin was the color of burnished olive wood, weathered by a sun I recognized, and his hair was thick and dark, like raw wool. When I looked into his eyes, I saw the weight of every tear ever shed in the Middle East, a compassion so heavy it forced me to my knees. I couldn't speak or even breathe properly. I just wept, without knowing why, recognizing him instantly as the truth I had always been taught to ignore. He reached out a hand that bore the scars of a different kind of war and spoke one word that healed every broken piece of my soul. Reza. The sound of my name in his voice felt like coming home after a lifetime of exile. He didn't offer a sermon or a condemnation. He simply said. He had something vital to show me, a truth I had to carry back to the world of men. As his fingers touched my shoulder, the beautiful paradise around us began to dissolve, replaced by a dark, smoky vision of a room where the fate of nations was being sold for profit. Jesus waved his hand, and the floor of that smoky room transformed into a transparent, living map of the Persian Gulf. I saw the world not as the generals described it, but as a chessboard of light and shadow. To my horror, I saw glowing golden threads stretching directly from the White House in Washington to hidden underground bunkers in Tehran. These weren't lines of conflict, but pulses of communication and shared purpose. While my fellow soldiers and I were shouting, "Death to America!" in the mud, our leaders were sending secret signals across the ocean. It was a perfectly choreographed theater designed in 1979 to create a permanent tension that keeps the world's attention fixed on a fake war. I fell back, my mind racing with the images of the friends I had lost to American-made shrapnel. I wanted to scream that it couldn't be true, that my sacrifice had to mean something more than a line on a ledger. Jesus looked at me with a sadness that felt like a physical weight and said, "Reza, there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known." He wasn't just talking about personal secrets. He was exposing the foundational lies of the kingdoms of men. He showed me that the very enemies I was taught to hate were actually silent partners, using our warm blood as the ink for their secret dark contracts. The vision zoomed in on the Strait of Hormuz, where massive tankers moved through the dark water. On the news, we heard they were dodging mines and fearing for their lives, but from this divine perspective, I saw they were being escorted by a combined spiritual force that transcended any flag. "Look at the black blood, Reza," Jesus whispered, referring to the oil flowing beneath us. I saw the wealth of both nations merging behind closed doors in expensive European villas. Leaders from both sides were laughing as they coordinated their public outrages to justify massive military spending. As the Bible says, the love of money is truly a root of all kinds of evil in this world today. A dark mist began to rise from the television screens in every home, a frequency of manipulation that Jesus called the harvest of discord. He showed me that the hatred felt by the Iranian and American people is a manufactured tool used by the elites to maintain internal control. By creating a perpetual threat, these leaders could justify crushing their own people's desire for freedom, while their business partners across the ocean did the same. This wasn't a clash of civilizations. It was a closed loop of tyranny. He warned me that our real enemy wasn't across the sea, but in the hearts of those who trade the ultimate divine truth for fleeting worldly power and empty promises today. I stood there, trembling, as the magnitude of this global deception started to sink into my spirit. I had spent my entire adult life ready to die for a border that was being erased by the very men who told me to guard it. But as painful as these revelations were, Jesus told me that the most chilling part of the vision was still to come. He turned his gaze toward the future, toward a time when the masks would finally be dropped to make way for a formal global system. "What I have shown you is the theater of greed," he said. "But now you must see the dark coming harvest." That was when the living light turned cold. Jesus showed me a series of private islands and hidden villas in Switzerland where the air was cold and smelled of expensive cigars and ancient dust. I saw men in tailored suits, some wearing the turbans of my country and others the flags of the West on their lapels, clinking glasses over maps of the world. They weren't arguing. They were laughing at the incidents they had scheduled for the upcoming months to keep the oil markets volatile. It was a perfectly synchronized dance of manufactured outrage. Jesus pointed to a screen showing a riot in Tehran and a protest in New York, and I saw the same dark energy fueling both sides to maintain a profitable chaos. I turned to Jesus, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and absolute confusion, as I asked him why they would allow so many of us to die if they were truly on the same side. He looked at me with a gaze that seemed to pierce through the history of the world and said, "Reza, a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand, but a kingdom that pretends to be divided can rule the hearts of the fearful forever." He explained that these leaders don't serve the nations they claim to lead. They serve a dark architect who uses their greed to build a cage for humanity. Every drop of blood we spilled was just grease for their machine. The vision expanded, and I saw that this wasn't just about money or politics. It was a deep, spiritual lineage of deceit that had been passed down through generations of power-hungry men. Behind every enemy face on the news, there was the same shadow pulling the strings, a force the Bible describes in 2 Corinthians 11:14, when it says that Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. I saw that the religious fervor of my youth and the patriotic pride of the West were being harvested as frequencies of discord to keep us from seeing our common Creator. It was a spiritual blockade designed to prevent the light of the true gospel from reaching the thirsty souls of the East. Then, Jesus showed me something that made me fall to my knees, sobbing into the celestial light, because the weight of it was simply too much for a human heart to bear. I saw a vision of a future conflict, a third world war that the media was already preparing the world to accept as inevitable. But in this divine perspective, I saw the documents already signed and the borders already redrawn in secret meetings that haven't even happened yet in your time. The enemies had already decided who would lose and who would win, calculating the exact number of acceptable casualties to usher in a new, singular global system of total energy and soul control. I cried out for him to stop the vision, my spirit feeling like it would shatter from the sheer coldness of this betrayal by the men we called our guardians. Jesus placed his hand on my head, and his warmth began to push back the icy terror of what I had just witnessed. He whispered, "Do not fear what they fear, Reza, for their foundation is built on shifting sand, and their lies are the smoke that the wind will soon carry away." He told me that the only way to break the frequency of their manipulation is to stop looking at the flags of men and start looking at the light of the eternal kingdom. My mission was becoming clear. Jesus leaned closer, and the smoky rooms and maps of the Persian Gulf began to dissolve back into the brilliant, living radiance of his presence. He looked me in the eyes and said, "The theater of the world is coming to an end, and the masks will soon fall away to reveal the one who has always stood in the gap." He told me that I had seen these things not to spread fear, but to offer a path to the only true peace that exists. I felt a sudden, heavy pull downward, a sensation of being rushed back toward the pain and the smell of death in the hospital. It was time for me to carry this burden back. As the visions of global deception faded into his blinding radiance, Jesus placed his hand on my chest and whispered, "Go back, Reza. Tell them the borders are a lie, but my kingdom is real." I gripped his robe, begging to stay in that peace, rather than return to a world built on cold-blooded treachery. He looked at me with unyielding love and said, "You have seen the theater. Now you must warn the sheep." Suddenly, the light vanished, replaced by a brutal weight as my soul slammed into my broken body. The searing pain and icy hospital air rushed in, and I heard a nurse scream, "He's breathing!" as my heart kicked like a trapped bird. I am telling you this because the time Jesus warned me about is no longer in the future. It is standing at your door. For years, I kept this burden locked, terrified of the men who managed the black blood of the Persian Gulf. But the urgency in my spirit is now a fire I can't contain. Understand this: the threats you see between Washington and Tehran are a scripted performance designed to keep you paralyzed in a frequency of manufactured hatred. While you argue over flags, the elites are clinking glasses over maps of your future. Every drop of blood spilled in their wars is merely a transaction in a global firm that views your life as disposable. If you feel an unsettling sense that the world no longer makes sense, know that your intuition is a gift from the Creator. To those trapped in religions of fear or the noise of political despair, Jesus showed me that the only way to break their frequency is to stop feeding the theater with your attention. He wants you to stop looking at the flags of men and start looking at the light of the eternal cross, the only border that matters. The leaders of this world have already sold you out, but the King of Kings has already bought you back. Your only true alliance must be with the truth, for the stage is folding. I was sent back to ensure this message reached you today. If this revelation has pulled back the curtain on the lies, please subscribe and activate notifications to join this remnant of truth seekers. Give this video a like to help us bypass the algorithms that suppress this light. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you feel the theatrical nature of global events in your own life? Share this with one person who is blinded by the harvest of discord and needs to hear the truth. Remember, I died for 4 minutes to see that the stage is falling, but the man in the light is still standing for you.